All right, so in this part of the video, I'm going to add something to this that's going to show us on hand quantity of the item we're entering here. First, let's do some setup here. And then I'm going to go to this drop down options and just make a copy of this. So in here, I basically want to have in stock. Now to get to that in stock, what I'm going to do, I'm first going to get quantity received. And to do that, I'm simply just going to run some ifs from this received quantities in here. So I'm going to do some ifs. The sum range is going to be from my results, and it's going to be basically this. I'm going to do F4 and drop the end reference to send this all the way down, comma. And we want to sum it by category, name, and type. This will be 1. So again, I'll select this much, lock with F4, comma. In this range, I want that to be fruits, comma. And then I have to keep doing this. So the range and one of these options. So I'll go back to results. So all of this should give me the total for that combination. I got 1. So apparently fruits, apples, red. If we go back here, there's 1. That's correct. So now if I take this and drag this formula down, see this combination, fruits, apples, green, should be 0. Not here, here. And as you can see, it is. So basically we only have just 3. We have 12 of these and 33 of that. I'm going to delete some of these other lines. So let me just add some more onions to this so we can see that this actually works. So if I go here and do veggies and onions and one type and do another 11 of those, click add, see that automatically adds that 11. And the reason that adds that 11 is because that's now being added to results here. And what we're doing, we're taking this line and we're adding with this line and we get 12 plus 11. So that adds up to 23. So we got our totals for each one. Now to get our in stock, we're also going to add a column here. We're going to say quantity shipped. And for now, I'm just going to type some numbers. And in stock will be a formula that is the difference between what's been received minus what's been shipped. So if I drag this down, we'll get our numbers. Now, if you want to get to creating more robust inventory system, I have a video on that on the channel. You can watch that and make this more sophisticated. And then you could actually use a form similar to what we have to actually interact with an inventory system. But this will be my in-stock amount. I want to do this. When you, for example, go and select this combination, for example, we go and select fruits, bananas, regular, right? I want to automatically show in the form how many we have in stock. Now, you could add this anywhere you want, but since there's not that much space, I'm thinking that this quantity input box is very large to just enter quantity. So maybe we can use half of the space to actually show the quantity on hand right here in this input box. Now to do that, if I go back to Bootstrap, I'm going to be able to hopefully get some components to use for this. Let's try input groups. Okay, that's more like it. See how there's this like field and half of it is grayed out and there's some text and the other half is this. So that's kind of what I'm trying to do here. So let's just grab one of these, like this one, for example. And it seems like you need to add this on top of your form control. And I have to try this and see what happens. So I'm going to copy this, go back, and try to find my user form with that quantity input box. So I'm going to go ahead and add that right here. Let's just save and reload and see what this does. All right, so that adds this, but this is not on the same line with quantity. So it seems like they had this parent div input group. Maybe we have to do that too for this to work. So I'm going to copy that, go back. I'm not sure if we have to keep this one or replace the other one. Let's just do both and see what happens. So that now adds them next to each other, but it also does this, quantity received. That's not so good. So maybe what we will do, we'll just add a div to this whole thing. So we'll just take this and wrap this part in another div. And we open this here. We need to close it right after our input. Like so. All right, let's try this one more time. Okay, let's see. URL. So this label should go above the group. Isn't that what we did? No. Hopefully that should be enough to fix this. We're spending way too much time on this. Now, just want to make sure our validation still works. It does not put the actual validation text though, so maybe not so good. Let's go check what we can do about that. So maybe this should still go in here. So finally, I got the markup. Sorry it took so long, but there is the markup we need to make this happen. So now we have this @ sign. Now I don't think I want this ID for this span because I'm not going to actually do much on it. But what I want to do something like on hand. So basically it should look like on hand 12 or something. So if I go back and reload this, see we got on hand 12. I want to change this 12 obviously to the actual number. So I'm going to just put this in a span so I can control what's in there and give this an ID. And the reason I'm using a span is because I want this to stay in the same line. If I do a div, it will push it to the next line, which we don't want to happen in this case. I will initiate that with 0, I guess. We should probably have a space here. What we're going to do, we're going to add a class to this. And we'll do margin left 1. So now let's get to the important part. How are we going to update this 0? So what we need to do, we need to look at this combination of 3 items and go to our inventory list and find a match for that combination here and get this in stock. And the reason I put this in stock all the way on the left is because I want that to be as a part of this beginning of the range, because I don't want to get the whole thing with all these other columns. We may do a lot of other calculations in our spreadsheet. I want to get as little data as I need. And the easiest way to do is to make sure these columns are sitting right next to each other. So to do this, let's go back to our functions and create that function. Now we need to read the data, so let me just copy these 3 lines. Now this time the worksheet is called inventory. The range of data starts from row 2, column 1. Then we do 3 rows and 4 columns. So 4 columns. And the number of rows, again, should be dynamic. So it will be the last row minus 1 because we have headers on top again. So that should be exactly the same here. So this will get us the array, but we're not going to return it. Now, what we're going to do with this data, though, we're going to filter that. using 3 columns. So let's just create those 3 columns here for a second. So let's take the data array and we're going to filter it. We're going to do a callback function. Now, one thing you'll notice is that when I use the script side, I'm using V8 engine, so I can use all these constants, I can use arrow functions, so I can do all these things, which I'm not able to do here. Here, when I'm declaring all of this, you'll see how I'm doing var for all these declarations because we need this to be compatible with our browser. What we're going to do to filter this, for each row we get, we're going to take the first column and make sure it equals to whatever category that's passed to it. And then at the same time, we're going to add 2 more filters. One is going to be by item name, and the third one is going to be the item type. And the columns would be as they are in our array, so 0, 1, 2. But for now, this is just going to filter our data to rows that match that combination. And then we'll get, in our case, just 1 row. But let's just assume we're going to have 2 rows with the same thing. And we want to sum up those in stock numbers. I guess we could use reduce. Let me just do the semicolon here. Yeah, we're going to do reduce. So I'm going to do const total equals 2. We're going to take our filtered data. And this should have, because it should be an array, it should have reduce. And for each row in that, we're going to have a callback again. We're going to do 2 things here. We're going to have the total, and we're going to have the row. And maybe we shouldn't call this total. We'll call it subtotal. This subtotal is basically going to be the number we'll keep in mind to keep adding to it. And what this is going to return, whatever the subtotal is, plus the value from that column and row combination. So the column in this case is going to be 0, 1, 2, 3 from that row. So it's going to keep looping through all the lines and keep adding them. Now, I think we also need to give this a starting point as a parameter here after comma, and that's for our reduce right here. So this is the starting number for this subtotal. So initially we'll set it to 0 until we get the total. So right now, let's just console log. We don't need to do this return because it's a one-liner. So let's just console log that total. So if all of this goes well, that should give us 1. That's good. Now let's just go and artificially create another one of these lines. So now hopefully we'll get 2 if we run the same thing. Yep. So we got 2. All right, let's try another combination. Maybe we'll do fruits, bananas, regular. This is case sensitive, by the way. 22, which is correct. So that's good. There's one other thing we need to do. There are going to be cases when there is no match. We'll do an if statement. If we filter this data and we see there's nothing left, then we're not going to run this reduce on it. We'll say that if the length of filtered data is 0, then we want our total to be 0. Otherwise, we want it to be whatever this is. So this is how we're going to do that. We'll do this all in one line. We'll say filtered data dot length equals 0. Then we'll do a question mark. So we're saying if this, then we want this to be 0. Otherwise, it's going to be the result of this. So what I'm going to do instead of just saving this in a variable, I'm just going to return whatever that gives us back. And to be able to use this function, I'm just going to pass these as an argument. And we're going to remove all the rest of these lines. So now we should have a function, get quantity on hand, that's going to accept 3 parameters. And then it's going to run all of these. And then it's going to return the total. So now we should be able to run this on our front end side. Let's go create that function. Now, what's going to happen in this function? So in this function, to be able to update the quantity, we need to go get what's selected here, the item category, item name, and item type. So we've done that a few times here. I'm just going to copy from here. And we need the actual value. So those are IDs for our category, item name, and item type. So once we get what's in those boxes, we want to send that information to that backend script. And it seems like I named everything exactly the same. So that's what we're going to do. And what's going to happen when this function runs and there's no error, it should return that with success handler, which is going to be our return value. And we're going to create a function for this. And we need to now create this function. And that function will accept a parameter. And that parameter that's going to be returned is this, which is the total. So at that point, we should have the total. Now, once we have the total number, we have to just put that in we need this on hand. See that ID that we did to replace this 0 with the correct number. So on hand is the ID of our element. Let's go ahead and use that. So again, we'll find that element using its ID. And then we're going to change the text content. This is not an input box. It's just a container. So to change what's inside of that container, we're going to use text content. And that should be updated to the actual quantity that was received. So that's that. And when should all of this happen? Well, it should happen once this updates, this item type, that should update the quantity on hand. I think we already have a trigger for this, right? Well, we have the event listener for these two, but we don't have an event listener for the item type. So let's go ahead and create that. So when that item type changes, we're going to run that update quantity on hand function. Let's go see what happens so far. So I'm going to go back here, reload this thing. Let's just change this to some combination. I'm going to do veggies, onions. Was not a good pick. Let's try fruits, bananas, regular. Is it one option again? No. So after I loaded this, see on hand, 22. That's correct. But the problem with this was, see, this is only going to work if we're doing some change here. But this should happen even when I do this. This should also populate. It should also populate if I'm just changing the second one as well. So that means we have a few different places where we need to run that function, update quantity on hand. We already have this item category and item name functions that we called after first dropdown changed and after second dropdown changed. Let's go find those. See, after second dropdown changed. So all the way down here after this entire thing, I'm just going to add this to run that function. So after the second dropdown changes, we're going to do this. And after the first dropdown changes, we do this, and then it runs this after second dropdown change, which is this, which also already does that. So there's no need to mention that again. So let's go back and check this. Load the form. So it says we have 2. Good. Let me delete this and reload this form. So we have on hand 1 for this combination. Well, let me try to change that. Let's go fruits, bananas, regular. So organic is 0, regular is 22. Good. So let's do veggies, onions, 1 type. So if I go veggies, onions, 10. So maybe if it's possible, we can do a little bit of something that shows loading until it updates the number. I'll go to spinners and what is this? What if we try to do that? Let me copy that and try to place that directly in that form. Let's see what happens. Just gonna paste it right before. Let's just save it and see what happens for now. Does it even work inside of this? So it does work inside of that. That's a good thing. So I'm just going to change the position of this though. And I'm going to create another span to wrap around this entire thing. So now I have a span that starts here, ends here. And within this span, I'll have 2 of these. So I'll just paste the second one inside of here, which will be that spinner. And we're going to give it an ID. And I'm going to just move this margin class to this parent span that I've created here. So that way they will both be kind of indented instead of just one of them. So right now, if I do this, see there's a little spacing and then we have this thing. So let's see how we can handle this. I'm going to go back. And what I want to do, I want to basically show the spinner until we have the total, and then we hide the spinner. So let's see our functions. So we did this update quantity on hand. So when it starts running, we should probably just hide the quantity and display the spinner. So let's see. Where are the hiding utility classes for this? Visibility, invisible. So they still take up space. That's not what I want. Let me try display. So apparently there's this class, dnone. Okay, good. So what I'll do, I'll just go to this, open the class list, and we'll go ahead and add that class to basically just hide that. And then when we hide that, we also want to make sure we show the on-hand spinner. So we want to make sure that initially we don't show that on-hand spinner though. So let's go ahead and add that dnone class to it so it doesn't show up. So there's that. So there's our spinner. So to all this class lists, I'm going to just add dnone. So it should be invisible. But then what we'll do, we'll make our on-hand quantity invisible, and then we'll make this one visible. And then what we'll do after this whole thing runs and we got a successful return after quantity on hand returned over here. We'll update the quantity and then change the visibility for these things. We'll just turn this one to remove and this one to add. So let's go back and test this. So I'm going to go ahead, save and reload this. See, that was doing that until it loaded. Now it says on hand there is 1 for this. So that's actually pretty good. Let's try to check this. What if I change this to bananas? See, it's loading, so it's giving us that. So if I change this to regular, loading, and then we got 22. That's pretty nice, I think. If I go veggies and do onions, one type, see, we got our quantity on hand 10. And finally, let's just see what happens when we add something. So let's actually do this combination. That's fine. And let's just do 77 and do some dates and click add. So that did add to the total. And now we have in stock 87, but this didn't update. So we need to also update this after we submit the form. So let's go and do that as well. So that's going to be this function, update quantity on hand again. And that's going to happen after we submit the form. So let's see. See, after we submit the form, we clear all the values. And we're going to show that toast that it's successful. And then we'll also try to update the quantity on hand as well. Save this. Let me go back and check this out. So reload the thing. So we have veggies, onions, one type. Let's go ahead and select that. Let's add another 13. And that updates and we got 100. I think that's pretty nice. And again, that's updating because we're adding all of this to this tab. And that's recalculating with our formula here. And then we grab that information from here and use it in our form. We got on hand 100. And now I can go back, for example, and do fruits, apples, and red. And if we do 12, we got just 1. See, it updates to 13 here, it updates to 13 here, and you don't have to be in here to see this. So if I was on this tab or a completely different tab, and let's say I decide to add another 27 of these, there it is, updated to 40. And that should give you some idea how we can do this sort of things. So now we can interact with our backend again, go get some information. And you can also see how we can put also some formulas in place as well and use that in our advantage. Hopefully all of this makes sense. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe. And I'll see you in the next video.